I would like to spend a bit of time on this theme, which I call being held by the web of life. That's something that's come up in various practices during this retreat, in our touching the earth, and this morning in the reading and meditation. And that is touching the ultimate dimension. And that's a resource. We need good resources in this time if we want to create something new, something more life-affirming, more healthy, in tune with nature and each other than what we have had so far. And so all of the things we've touched on this retreat are resources. Being in touch with the wonders of life, with what's joyful and nurturing, being able to embrace our difficulties, our hard, tender emotions, and also to be in touch with a bigger picture, with the ultimate dimension as an enormous source of energy. I'd like to come back to a few phrases from the poem we heard yesterday by Wendell Berry. I come into the peace of wild things. I come into the presence of still water. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. And I would invite us to take a moment to explore within ourselves what that feels like, freedom. What does it feel like in the body, mind, heart? Do we maybe have a memory that bubbles up? Again, it's not, there's no need to think hard about it. It's just a matter of tuning in. Let store consciousness do the work. It might throw up some memory, or it might not, which also is fine. It might happen tonight when you wake up to go to the bathroom, then the memory pops up. That's also what store consciousness does. How does freedom feel? Do you feel it in a particular place in the body? Does it come with a particular sensation? How does freedom feel in your heart, in your mind? Let's explore the causes and conditions for freedom to manifest. So I invite you to turn to a neighbor and take 2 minutes each. So one person speaks, the other person just listens with their best mindful listening and presence. And the speaker share, completing the sentence, I feel free when I ride my bike. I feel free when I go on holiday, when I have unplanned time. And then you could just keep repeating, I feel free when, and again, don't think too hard, let it arise. You might surprise yourself if you allow your store consciousness to throw up things. You might hear yourself say things that you didn't expect. And then after 2 minutes, I will invite the small bell, and then we can swap over, and the other person listens, and the other person shares. Shall we do that? Little exploration. Many spiritual traditions of the world have a similar, experience. In Plum Village terminology, Thai talked about the relative or the conventional dimension and about the ultimate dimension. And they are not separate, they belong together. By touching the present moment concretely in the here and now, we can touch the ultimate dimension. So the conventional truth or relative truth is how we see things through the lens of our concepts and ideas, how we are conditioned to make sense of the world, and that is belief of separateness or a perception. We perceive ourselves as a distinct, separate entity, self-entity, and everything else is also separate. And there's this famous quote by Einstein who said, we have this optical delusion of separateness, and that's why we need to extend our hearts to be compassionate to all of our fellow beings, human and otherwise. In the ultimate dimension, we know there's interbeing. I think for me it's a coming home to a very deep knowing when we touch the earth and we hear that that our body is made of minerals that originate in outer space zillions of years ago. We are stardust. When we start to look at reality in that way, so we interact with these stars, we interact with our ancestors, generations of ancestors, and then we are also interact with our non-human ancestors, as we heard in some of these practices on this weekend. And usually our daily mind, day-to-day thinking mind, it's mind-boggling. We can't fathom. But when we go deeper in meditation, our store consciousness knows this. I don't know whether anyone had this experience of, I get it. This is on some level which is not necessarily my rational mind. In Buddhism, often the lovely image is used of the wave and the water. So there's the waves that are all different and distinct from each other. And then there is the water that is just water. Huge. And it's both. We are these little waves. That's also part of how we live and how we are. And we're also water. And why does it matter? Because if we're just in the conventional relative realm and perceive ourselves as separate, we can easily get depressed. And some of us do get depressed. And we lose energy, we don't have the energy to face the things we need to face. And if we are able to touch our interbeing nature, then that is an enormous resource, a source of energy. I think nature offers itself for us to touch the interbeing. When we hug a tree, as some of us did this weekend, we feel we interact with this tree. So it's a coming home to the realizing. It's fairly straightforward to grasp it intellectually, but still the mind gets what? But to feel it in our heart and bones, that we are not separate, that we are held in the web of life. So in our little exercise of when do we feel free, maybe there is something like a relative freedom. Maybe I feel the sense of freedom when I go out on a bike trip, like several days, and then I'm on my bike and the wind is blowing through my hair, and I feel a sense of freedom, of having time, and that's maybe a relative freedom. So there's less self-concern, and just there's enjoyment of the wonders of life. But there's also a freedom, an ultimate freedom, which is maybe, I have experienced it in the past week, something like that, maybe a little bit. We lost a dear friend last week, a friend from the Five Sangha, died from cancer, and maybe you could just, so those of us who knew Alison could just, we have her with us in a picture, we could just take a breath and remember her smile. And I was preparing for this retreat at the same time, so I was very much in touch with these teachings, and I had moments of feeling her freedom and her, there's no words for it. The ultimate dimension goes beyond words. Just a sense of awe and wonder at this stream of life that we're part of, that has no beginning and no end. There's 2 sentences in the earth touchings. We all exist together as a wonderful stream of life, which is always moving and has no beginning and no end. I am one with the wonderful pattern of life that radiates out in all directions. I find these sentences really moving. And if we realize this deeply in moments, we can touch deep, deep peace and non-fear. Those of us who took the brown booklet away, how to enjoy my practice, the 3 earth touchings are in there, a different version from the one we used here, but these sentences you can find there. So just to finish this, I would like to share briefly how I practice with this in very concrete terms. When I went through a bereavement almost 20 years ago, and that was the first time in my life that I experienced that kind of depth of grief. I lost my ex-partner and very close friend in very unfortunate circumstances. And I had already practiced for 10 years then, so there was my store consciousness saying, breathe. It came from nowhere, but when I got the news, I heard a mysterious voice saying, breathe. And I breathed. And then it was like, I heard Thai say this so many times, to cradle our grief, to cradle our emotions. So I will do this and see what happens, whether it works. And so I did this for a long time. Every day I sat with loss and grief and tenderness and anger, and I journaled a lot at the time. I had a wonderful sangha, and the Findhorn community. I had lots of support and wonderful conditions to really practice with grief. And I journaled and wrote poems, and then when I looked back at what I wrote and these poems, what touches me now is that at the time I wasn't thinking about it, but my grief was not destructive but life-affirming. I kept connecting with life in the sorrow. And there's beautiful images in these poems that just came up in the moment. So comes up in my words that I did feel held in this very difficult time that in hindsight probably lasted the best part of 4 years to make sense of and to digest. So I also read Thai's beautiful book at the time, No Death, No Fear. I went to Plum Village. So I had this ultimate, my connection with the ultimate, the sense of being held, nurtured. And as a final word, I'd like to finish with a word about trauma-aware practicing. As I said, I had very good conditions. I had a strong Sangha and community and Plum Village to hold me in allowing myself to touch the grief and work through it. And that's not maybe the average situation for many of us. And especially if we deal with trauma, if we have a history of trauma, or if we are facing a traumatic life situation, we know much more than we did 10 years ago. So it's really important to listen to how much can we take. We can practice a little bit and then move back again. And then it's also okay to distract ourselves. You know, maybe there are nurturing distractions. Maybe it's not the fridge, but maybe it's a nice book or something. Or a funny show on telly. So being really aware that when we practice with trauma, that we don't want to re-traumatize, but we want to, the term is self-regulate and co-regulate. So when we have a Sangha and we can share and are really listened to, our nervous system receives the message, you're safe, this present moment is safe. So we're co-regulating. When we offer our heartfelt listening, we help another person to work through trauma in that way. But we can also self-regulate. That's also what I did at the time, just breathing and tapping into that place of connection with something larger. So we want to take very good care of our precious hearts. And as we do that for all of us. And that's such a privilege that we have a practice, that we can do this for ourselves and for each other, because I feel this is also a service to the world at large, where we are dealing with so much trauma. There is a lovely book, if you're interested in this subject of trauma-aware practice. It's fairly new, by an American Dharma teacher, Joanne Rosen. It's called Unshakable. and I will include it with the resources. Another wonderful book is Thai's Reconciliation. Reconciliation? Yeah. It has a subtitle?
Healing the Inner Child.
Healing the Inner Child, thank you. I will also include this. I've worked with both books to great benefit, just for my own healing. So let's enjoy the sound of the bell and then open the space for questions.